Yeah, I tell people, like, I'm so fat right now, and they're like, bro, shut the fuck up. I'm 30 years old, still haven't had a sip of alcohol. Hard work doesn't guarantee success, but without it, you're guaranteed failure. And when he took his shirt off and he stepped on the scales, everybody's like, who the fuck is this kid? And he's like, you'll find out soon enough.
Hello everybody, I'm Dan Hardy. Welcome to Between Rounds, a new show that we're launching where I get to sit down and talk to some of my favourite people. And Dalton, you just stole the show last year. Obviously it didn't work out the way that you wanted it to, but I mean, it just kind of felt like you were becoming the person that you're supposed to be last year. Did it feel like that to you a little bit?
Yeah, I think I showed people a glimpse of what I'm capable of at the end of the day. Like you said, it didn't go my way in the finals, but this year's a new year. And got a lot of opportunities in front of me, so I'm looking forward to going out there and taking advantage of it.
What was the feeling? Obviously, I've been on the end of a loss before, and it's always something you have to kind of work your way through. But what's been the process between that and where you're at now?
The way I processed the loss, I was heartbroken. You know what I mean? I was winning the fight up until that point. It was a competitive fight, but I was winning, and I wasn't fighting up to my full potential either. I was fighting sloppy. I wasn't fighting the way I trained. I don't want to make excuses, so I'm not going to. You know, he was a better man that night. But I just know that I wasn't myself in there. Mm-hmm. And it sucks because I put so much work and so much time, and I did everything I possibly could to give myself the best chance of success, not just on that night, but that entire year. And it started since I was a little kid, but if we're talking about last year in particular, I did everything right, you know, from the diet to the recovery to rest, training, eliminated all distractions. And I don't think I could have worked any harder. And at the end of the day, with all that said, you know, it still didn't go my way. So it's like hard work doesn't guarantee success, but without it, you're guaranteed failure. That's the way I look at it.
That's nice. You said something interesting then. You said it started all the way back in childhood. Like, talk to me about that. At what point were you like, I'm going to be something?
It started when I was a little kid. I don't know. There's something just different about me than my friends, you know. My friends always wanted to, even a little kid, you obviously not drinking and partying and stuff whenever you're like a toddler, you know what I mean, adolescent. But it was just, I was always invested into sports. I was always doing extra, always in the weight room when my friends were out, you know, having fun as kids, like playing tag, you know, running the streets at nighttime, ding dong ditch, all the stuff that us little kids did. I was in the gym with my dad since I was like nine years old, you know what I mean? That's whenever I started taking like supplements and everything else as well. And then you move on to your teenage years when everybody starts drinking and smoking and partying in high school, and then into college, the same thing. I never gotten any of that. Still to this day, I'm 30 years old, just turned 30 years old in November. I still haven't had a sip of alcohol.
Wow.
To this day. Not one sip, never tasted it, never tried it. And I don't feel like I'm missing out, you know. Sometimes when I tell people that, they're like, oh, you're missing out. Some other people are like, good, don't ever try it. You know what I mean? But it wasn't like, I never had any desire, was never tempted to. And part of it was sports. And then later I came to realize that it's just not part of my personality.
Is it fair to say that your dad set that tone? Because you mentioned about being in the gym with him, or were you the one that was demanding to be in the gym and he was the one taking you?
You know, it was a little bit of both, I want to say. Like, it was like he never forced me to do any of that. I mean, at the same time, I feel like if he didn't like expose me to that environment, to like the gym, maybe I wouldn't be the way I was nowadays, you know? And then like he was never the type of parent to like tell me I couldn't do something. Like, he never told me I couldn't drink, nothing like that. It's never a conversation we had, but he kind of led by example. And I'm not saying my dad never had alcohol. I've seen pictures of him at his wedding, you know, with champagne and stuff like that. And he told me stories about whenever he was a teenager and he was a kid and he went out in the mountains on a hunting trip with his friends and they're drinking beer and stuff like that. And he's like telling me, like, if you're gonna do something, you know, do that. Don't get into the hardcore drugs. But there was never beer in my house. I've never seen alcohol in my house at all. I've never seen him drink since I was a kid. So, like, if he did it, it wasn't around me.
It's interesting that I remember I had a friend of mine when I first started school, secondary school, like maybe 12 or 13. I had a friend of mine who got a small set of dumbbells, and he was super consistent, and he looked so much different to everybody else in school purely because he had the dedication to lift and just to, to be on point with his diet. Was there a point where you like you must have looked at your friends that weren't putting the same amount of work in and been thankful for your discipline, your dedication? Because you must have physically always been in really good shape from the very beginning.
I don't want to say I compared myself to my friends, because a lot of my friends are hard workers as well. You know what I mean? A lot of good athletes in my friend group, a lot of hard workers. To speak on how I looked, my physique, to kind of finish it off, I remember I just seen an article recently the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette did. My wrestling coach spoke in the article, and he was saying that he remembers the first time I ever walked into a wrestling tournament after joining Laurel's wrestling team, which was my junior year in high school. And whenever I weighed in on the scales, all the kids and all the coaches and everybody were like looking at me because I was like super jacked, I guess. And he's like, he didn't look like a normal high school kid. You know what I mean? When he took his shirt off and he stepped on the scales, everybody's like, who the fuck is this kid? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you remember in the article he put I remember one coach specifically asking me, who is this kid? And he's like, you'll find out soon enough.
Nice.
And then
Do you hear from anybody? Do you hear from those guys that are obviously seeing what you're doing now and being like, man, we knew you were going to do something like this?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Speaking of my high school wrestling coach, I go back there quite often to wrestle with some of the kids.
Nice.
I just went back with the PFL recently. But I didn't just do it for the camera. You know what I mean? I've been going back there. There was a kid there named Grant McKay, who ended up being a 2-time state champ at our high school. Only state champ ever. I didn't win states. But I remember his 10th grade year, he didn't really have any partners. Kevin asked me to come up wrestle with him, so I did. And the kid was good. I remember telling Kevin after practice, I'm like, this kid's gonna be a state champion. He was like, he'll make it. He was like, maybe we could talk about him getting in the podium, but we'll talk about the end of the year. And I was like, nah, sometimes people just need someone to believe in them. And I'm telling you, I was like, believe in that kid. I was like, he's gonna be a state champion. And he's smaller than me. He was like 160 pounds at the time. I was probably 200. And he was scrappy, super scrappy, good pressure, good technique, trying to kill me when he was wrestling me. And he's also a 15, 16-year-old kid, and I could just tell, I could just feel it. You know what I mean? I was like, this kid's gonna be a state champ. Fast forward to the end of the season, I get a text message from Kevin, my coach. He was like, you were right. He's like, he won it. He's like, and I made sure to tell him what you said after.
So what do you get from going back into the wrestling room with the younger lads? And obviously, you're talking about a 16-year-old that's really, coming for you, trying to put it on you. What's the benefit in you being back on the mat with those young active athletes?
Honestly, it kind of grounds me a little bit. You know what I mean? Especially it reminds me of where I came from. You know what I mean? How I started and where I'm at now, and how far I've come. And then also in instances like that where I'm wrestling against someone like Grant, I'm like, man, I got to step it up. This guy's kind of putting it on me, and he's a 16-year-old kid. It's ain't fun, but so I just feel like it brings me back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah. What was your first introduction to martial arts? Were you aware of martial arts before wrestling? And when did martial arts come onto your radar, and then when did MMA become a thing that you were aware of?
So it's kind of I don't want to say a long story, but I have to jump around a couple points. So I started wrestling when I was 5. My dad put me straight into a wrestling program when I was 5. Funny story for the camera. The fans are probably gonna love this, especially the fans that hate me. When I was 6 or 7, I was probably 6. I was at a wrestling tournament. I won my first 2 matches. Then I was in the semifinals, and I was wrestling against a girl. And I didn't know how to go about it because, it's taught not to hit girls or anything whenever you're growing up. So I'm like, and also, how do I grab her? Where do I can't treat her the same way as a guy, you know what I mean? So, or a boy at the time. And so I went out and wrestled her, and I ended up losing. I lost to a girl. It upset the shit out of me, you know what I mean? And I ended up quitting wrestling because of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I didn't get back into wrestling until I was 14 years old, going into high school. So I took a good break, 6-7 years. And in that time, I decided to get into boxing. So I started dabbling a little bit of boxing when I was 8 years old. Then my dad got me into Jiu-Jitsu at a guy named John Rosta in Newcastle. He had mats and stuff in his basement. That's where he ran his gym out of. Whenever I was 12, we didn't have a wrestling program at Newcastle High School where I was at until I moved to Laurel. So I was kind of using that as a way to get experience grappling, wrestling until I got back into wrestling. and I kind of fell in love with it. You know what I mean? And that was right around the time, you know, where Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz are real, you know.
What a great rivalry.
Yeah. Real famous in the sport. And then you had Brock Lesnar come on the scene, then Ronda Rousey, and all these other people. And I used to love watching WWE growing up. You know what I mean? So like when I discovered UFC and MMA, you know, I'm like, this is awesome. You know, so it was like kind of like I always wanted to be a professional athlete, and I thought wrestling was real at first. You know what I mean? So I was like, I want to be a WWE wrestler, and then it was like, no, I want to be in the NFL. And then MMA came along, and I was like, I would do that too. You know, so it got to the point where I kind of like wanted to just let life choose for me.
Okay.
And that's essentially what happened. Football didn't work out, and MMA happened to, you know. But I couldn't. If you told me, put a gun to my head and told me to choose, I don't know if I'd be able to choose between the two. Yeah.
You just kind of, why? Because you enjoyed both of them so much.
Yeah, football was my first love, for sure. But like I couldn't choose between the two. Just to be honest with you, like if you told me like you only get to do one for the rest of your life, you can never think of the other ever again, I wouldn't be able to choose. It's just one of those things. It's tough.
Yeah. There was never an idea that you would do something that wasn't athletic based.
Yeah, I always wanted to like be a professional athlete. There's nothing wrong with a 9 to 5. You know what I mean? But that's not what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I can't. I might have a little ADHD. Never been diagnosed, but I can't sit still.
Right. Okay. So fighting suits you then, because you've got to be on your feet most of the time.
For sure.
Were there any fighters that stood out to you? Anyone that you looked up to? Anyone that you liked the style of and you learned from when you were watching them?
John Jones.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. He's the greatest fighter of all time. You know, he's a go. I know a lot of people like to argue that because of the PED.
Yeah.
You know,
Super.
but back then, whenever I was a kid, I'm 14 years old. I'm still growing into my body. You know what I mean? That's kind of like who I wanted to emulate growing up. But I think our styles are obviously much different. So that was someone I looked up to and I liked watching. Another person ended up being a huge fan of was Conor McGregor. I think everybody was at one point. Eventually, kind of got turned off to him a little bit. I don't agree with a lot of the antics and a lot of the stuff that I see out.
Well, and especially if you're so disciplined with you're not drinking or anything like that, and and you were working security, you were working doors. It was probably reinforced constantly why you shouldn't be drinking because you were surrounded by people making bad decisions all the time.
That was definitely another reason why it was easy not to do it. You know, constantly like seeing people make bad decisions, constantly seeing people get beer balls. Yeah. You know what I mean? People would talk to me and I'd smell the alcohol in their breath and it turned me off towards it. I'm like, it's disgusting. You know what I mean? And then you see people sick the next day. I'd be driving behind people in the city. They'd open the door and be puking in the road. And I'm like, this just doesn't even look fun.
What I'm interested to know, though, is when it comes to celebrating, what do you do? Like, are you a food guy?
Yeah, big foodie.
Oh, okay. Because you don't look like a food guy, you know what I mean? Like,
bro, after my last fight,
Yeah.
I got up to 235 pounds.
Wow.
Bro. Yeah, I tell people, like, I'm so fat right now. And they're like, bro, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I step on, like, I get an in-body scan. It says I'm 11% body fat. And I'm like,
that's not fair.
I know. But, like, I'm puffy. I look like a balloon. The thing is, I still had abs. You know what I mean? But I'm puffy. But I'm puffy.
Never. How did you find American Top Team? How did you become settled there?
So I tried a couple different gyms, you know, like big gyms like that. And I don't want to mention, like, names. I tried them like throughout like the end of my amateur career, trying to find a home for whenever I turned pro, and I kind of didn't like them. I didn't like the way things were run there. weren't organized enough. People just not coming in to the night sessions. Like people missing. Not a lot of guys were on my weight, whatever reason. But I remember one of my friends that I trained with up here, Cody Law. He fought for Bellator and then the PFL in one fight. He moved out of American Top Team to help George Masvidal get ready for the Kamaru Usman fight because he was a national champ, Division II national champ in college in wrestling. And they brought him in to kind of like help George. And then he was telling me how much he liked it down there. So I'm like, man, and this was during COVID. So like they really weren't letting anybody in. So I had to like talk to a couple people to like, you know, put a word in for me. And they let me come down and try it out for a week. And I remember like 2 or 3 days in, because the coaches were watching me closely. They're like, I want to see if this guy is like legit, if this guy, because I was 4-0 at the time. They're like, yeah, sure, he's 4-0 in Bellator, but like, you know, who's he fighting? You know what I mean? Let's see how he does against the top level guys in the world in this gym. And I was doing well. You could see they had their eyes on me. And then like day 2 or day 3, Dan Lambert called me to the side of the mat. And I'm like, at this point, you know what I mean, I don't know if I'm getting in trouble for doing something. I don't know if it's going to be good, you know what I mean, especially if you know Dan Lambert too. You never know what's coming out of his mouth. So I walk up to him and he just tells me straight up, he's like, go back home, get the rest of your shit and move it into the dorms. He's like, you're part of American Top Team now.
That's awesome.
So,
and the dorms are great there. My first time at American Top Team, I think it was 2002, and it was the old Coconut Creek place, and I got my ass kicked for a month straight.
Yeah.
A month straight, got my ass kicked. I loved it, and I came back a little bit later, but I always had an affinity for American Top Team, mainly because of Conan. You know what I mean? I've always held him in high regard. He just seems to be, he's like a team leader, but a father figure as well for a lot of people in that gym. But with American Top Team growing so quickly, it seems to be like it's not even just it's a super gym now, isn't it? It's potentially the biggest roster of fighters in any one gym in the country. Who are your main guys? Who are your main training partners? People that you work with on a daily?
I mean, like that's hard to say because whenever you walk into a wrestling practice on Monday, you know, there's 100 people in there.
And that's Marco running that class, is it? Yeah.
And that's former Olympian, you know what I mean, as our wrestling coach, you know, in a state-of-the-art gym, 50,000 square feet, dorms in it, you know, like I said, 100 fighters from all across the world. You got people from Russia, from Dagestan, from Poland, from England, from Brazil, all across America, you know, people from Japan. It all depends on who's matching up with who has a fight coming up. So we talked before last year. I was doing a lot of training with Sapato last year, Shoeface. I was training with Johnny Eblin before we were kind of on trajectories to fight each other. You know, Josh Silvera, who's also in the PFL, Marvin Vittori, Amari Akhmedov, before he left. You know, then you had Magomed Karamov, who's a former champ that I used to do a lot of training with. Magomed Umalatov, you know, like I said, I could just go on and on and on and on. One of my favorite training partners, though, is Yaroslav Amosov.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes, bro.
Very technical, isn't he?
Yeah, he's so good. He's so good, man. Where he impresses me is his ability to hold people down. Like, for me to get out from under him, I have to use every ounce of energy, and it has to be scramble.
That moment where he pulled his Bellator belt from underneath the step in his house was because he hid it, didn't he, during the wars. That was an amazing moment.
Speaking on that, I feel like if it wasn't for that war and him being out of training for so long, Jason Jackson's a great fighter, fabulous fighter, you know, great fighter. But I just think Yaroslav would have beat him, to be honest with you. And that's no dig at Jason Jackson. I think Jason Jackson's one of the best in the world. But I just think Yaroslav is the best. And I feel like the next couple years in the UFC, we're gonna end up seeing that, you know.
Right. Let's pick one of these questions. Do you want to pick it?
Sure. Let's go.
I'm not sure who these are from as well. You should have the person's name on it as well. You got it? Do you want to do it?
Yep. It's, do I read the name too?
Yeah, go on. Let's.
It's Alexis from production.
Okay.
She said, what does a normal day look like for you when you're not in camp and no one's watching? Man, you know, if you're a dedicated fighter, you're always in camp. You know, you might not have a name, you know, but you're training still 2 times per day at least. You know, and for me, all I got is fighting. You know what I mean? I don't really hang out with people outside of the gym. All my friends are back here. I don't make new friends easily. I don't trust people easily, and that's partially on me, not anybody else. If I'm not training, I drive myself insane, man. If I get out of my routine, you know what I mean, I start going nuts.
Really?
So, yeah. So
what do you do when you're not in the gym? Are you movies, books, music, video games?
I have a motorcycle now, so I ride my motorcycle. I had one a few years ago, but I got rid of it because it's super dangerous. And my dad actually passed away because of a motorcycle accident. So I knew the risk before I got it the first time, but it was something I always wanted whenever I was a kid. So I got it, and then I was like, you know, I got that out of me. I'll sell it now. And I sold it. A couple years went by, and I'm like, I miss it. So I got it back again. Like going around in jet skis, you know, hanging out with, you know, friends, girlfriend, stuff like that. I don't know.
You're not holding still though. You're never sitting down.
No, me and Dakota went skydiving recently, so that was my first time ever doing that. Okay. I'm a thrill seeker, so like I said, hunting, you know, shooting guns, riding motorcycles, jet skis. Now we're adding, you know, skydiving to the list, you know, so on top of fighting, you know what I mean? So anything, you know, that brings me thrill, anything that brings me an adrenaline rush, you know, is kind of what I'm trying to do. And then when I'm just trying to chill out, you know, I'll play some video games with my friends. I like, obviously, eating food. We were just talking about that. Pizza, burgers, milkshakes. all that type of stuff. So
Yeah. Do you and the coach train much together? I've seen you sparring and stuff on your Instagram and stuff. Do you actually do technical work together much?
no, not really.
No.
No, I think there's just too big of a size difference there.
I mean, that's part of it. That's part of the reason why I was asking, because you are considerably bigger, but it must be fun kind of trading techniques with her, though. You know what I mean? I mean, she's
helped me with a few things that I was struggling with. So, like kickboxing wise, defensively, stuff like that. So I always ask for, like, if she's watching my sparring, and it may have not been the greatest sparring, or even if it is a really good sparring, you still make mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, even when you're winning, you know what I mean? It's like, I want to clean this up. Like, what would you do when someone does this? You know what I mean? So I ask her stuff like that. Try to give her tips sometimes too, but like I said, she doesn't really need it. She's pretty good everywhere.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. And thanks for joining me, and
Yeah.
Pegasus as well. Thanks for joining us.
He's getting a little fussy now.
Yeah, it's been a good conversation. It's not very often we get to sit down and have a proper conversation like this. I appreciate your time.
I
I appreciate you opening up as well and
thank you.
sharing some information. Thanks for joining us for this conversation. It was really, really fascinating. Give him a follow if you're not already following him. I'm sure you are. Make sure you tune into his fights. I mean, Hercules is the man. You've got to keep an eye on him, because there's big things coming in his future, and for Pegasus as well. Of course, Pegasus is a superstar. Thanks for joining us between rounds, and we'll see you after the next one.